The thing I love about writing in Bemba, though, is because of the fact that there was no formal instruction when I was learning how to speak Bemba, and it's just a language I spoke when I would be at home with my family. When I write, the way that I write and the way that I compose is more intuitive. There isn't a
Oh,
lot
I
of
see. Yeah.
theory behind it. There isn't a lot of
Yeah.
grammar and comprehension and all of that behind it. It's very, very much emotion based, and it's very intuitive, based on the music that I listened growing up, and just based on the conversations that I'd have with people growing up and the stories that I heard. Yeah. Petra,
Hi, Stanley.
how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. It's so great to meet you here on Zoom.
Yeah, it's great to meet you too, finally.
Yeah. I saw you a very long time ago. Well, it feels like a very long time ago. In 2019, I saw you busking at the Victoria waterfront in Cape Town.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is quite a while ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been following you all that time and always seeing what you're doing and seeing how your career progressed and the most amazing music that you're writing and producing. And
Mm.
really, this is why I wanted to talk to you. It's such a fascinating journey that you went on.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you. It's very humbling to meet someone who's sort of been watching from a distance, from the beginning, and to hear such kind words. I feel like when you're like in the thick of it, you don't really realize that there's stuff happening and there's progress that's being made. And that's something a lot of artists experience, where they don't feel like they're growing. But it's always nice to have somebody who's sort of been watching from a distance, be like, "Hey, man, I can see that you're growing, and you're kind of doing a
Um,
good job." So, yeah, thank you for reaching out. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I always admire this because I think it's like you say, it's a long journey and it's constant and it's really determination and persevering in times where you probably don't have always the energy to do it, but you seem to get keep going.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, and it's very funny that you say that, where you talk about having a lack of energy to keep on going, because that's such a huge part of it. There's so many times and days where I'm just like, I can't really be bothered to try right now. But something that I always make sure of is I'll have those days, but I always make sure to sort of dust myself off after I've had the 3 or 4 day long existential crisis, and just keep
Yeah.
on forging ahead.
Mm. But
Mm.
I think it's also needed, I think it's also sometimes that time where you come to a standstill because I think it's then rethinking what you're doing, and then sometimes you get in these quiet times probably a new idea, or just that no, what I'm doing is right and what I'm doing I want to do. So
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like this is something that happens whenever you're someone who tries to pursue a career or even monetize any sort of passion that you have. You always hit this point where you feel like you don't want to keep on going. You feel like you're kind of wasting your time doing it, and it kind of makes it so much more worth it,
mm,
because in those moments when you experience that overwhelming desire to give up, and you kind of get through it and you keep on going, it gives you a new appreciation for it every single time, because it's always like you're really laboring to keep it going, which is a very important part of being able to create stuff that's of quality, in my opinion.
now I saw you in Cape Town, but are you originally from Cape Town?
No, so I'm originally from Zambia. When you saw me in Cape Town, that was most likely around November, December. I had been in South Africa for about maybe 8 months, because I got here in February of 2019. So I've been here
Oh,
about maybe
okay.
5 years now. Yeah.
So I saw you freshly in South Africa.
Hmm.
And singing, was that also always a something within you that you always done since a child?
Yeah, pretty much. Like growing up, I had, there was a lot of people in the household that I lived, and there was a huge range of music that was being played. My mom used to play a lot of gospel music because she's very, very religious. My uncles used to play a lot of like local music that was produced in Zambia, and they would play a lot of rap and hip hop as well. And my sister would play a lot of like pop music and boy band music, and she used to play it all the time, and she would be blasting it at the loudest volume in the living room, and she would like be singing along to it. And that's around the time that I started singing, because I would just sort of do it with her because it was a fun thing to do.
And so music as part of, but music is very part of African tradition, isn't it?
Hmm. Yeah, it is. It
Mm.
is that's another side of music that I was exposed to while I was growing up. In the roughly 11 years that I've been writing and playing music, it's not really a side that I explored a lot until the last 2 to 3 years when I started trying to get back in touch with that side. For most of the time that I've been writing and playing music, I've been writing and playing in English. But around 2 to 3 years ago, I made a conscious decision to try to explore that sort of more traditional side of it, and it's starting to come out now. But yeah, it's a very, very huge thing in African tradition to have music and to have like rhythms and melodies and that sort of thing.
Well, I saw some of your videos on your Instagram page where you are singing in the Cederberge and the
Hmm.
Cederbergs. And what language do you sing there?
So it's a language called Bemba. That's the
Okay.
language that I grew up speaking. It's one of the most widely spoken languages in Zambia as well.
Okay.
Hmm.
But even though I don't understand it, there's a sense of very calmness and very sort of you're in nature, and your voice and the music itself. It has such a calming effect. What is the song all about?
So the song itself talks about how, in situations where you have people who are close to you, people who you love quite a bit, it's not always that you're going to be able to see eye to eye with them. It's not always that you're going to be on the same page, and that's just part of life. It's part of navigating relationships with people that you love, and it's part of the human experience, and it's okay because my experience with my family and with the relationships that I've had in the past is there's an aspect of turbulence to it where as you're experiencing it, you feel like, oh, this is something that, this is going to be the end of the relationship. This is something that should not be happening. It shouldn't be the case that people who love me don't see things from the same perspective that I do or don't agree with me in everything that I'm trying to do. And it's only in the last like maybe 4 or 5 years of growth that I've come to realize that that is very much a regular and normal and even necessary part of it. And that's what I try to touch on with that song.
Well, beautiful that your lyrics are saying something, and almost like something from within you.
Mm.
And your is that the style of writing that you do? Sort of reflecting, and then are you inspired by these things that happen in your
Yes.
life?
Yeah, I am. When I look back on my music, it's like all of my music, or I would say most of it, is very much a sort of snapshot in time that captures something that I may have been going through when I wrote those songs. And that's sort of been the way that I've written from the time I started writing music, because I feel like that's the easiest way to maintain authenticity as an artist is to draw from personal experiences and try to say something based off of that.
Down to the depths of your soul, crushing with fire on blinding range, wave after wave as we go. So breathe me in as your sun stains my skin, and I feel
spoke to a South African singer-songwriter, Dani Reenwolf, and he said that it's almost as if when you tap into that sadness, or when you are not in those happy moments, that you really get these wonderful songs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where it's kind of an unfortunate part of being a creative, which is that in order for you to create something that's very, very beautiful, at some point in your life, you're going to have to experience an extreme amount of emotional turmoil. But I very much agree. Like for example, my first album, that's stuff that I wrote about, when I wasn't in a very good place in life. Um, and I feel like if I hadn't experienced all of the difficulty that I experienced with my emotional and mental health at the time, that album wouldn't have been what it was. Obviously, there's been a lot of growth from the person I was at that time to now, but it was still a very, very important aspect of what led to that album being what it was.
Mm. And then also for you, as you came from Zambia to South Africa, and I mean, we all know in any industry you have to have a network and contacts, and know the right people to get to do something. But was it difficult for you coming from Zambia to South Africa to start a career in music?
Yeah, it was. In terms of, it was very, very unfamiliar. Like everything that I experienced for the first 6 months of being here, all of it was new. Going to venues was new. Playing certain open mics was new. Playing certain venues with artists was new. And it's very, very difficult to try to like find a footing when you have no idea where your feet are landing every single time you take a step. So it was difficult in that aspect. But as far as creating a network, I was lucky enough to meet a lot of really, really kind, amazing, and very talented people who are open to helping. I got a lot of help from a lot of people when I got here. So that kind of made it easier to form a network and to sort of get started and kick off my career here.
Well, I just actually this morning had a conversation with my daughter about the fact that South African artists seem to be very open to helping each other, to sort of promoting each other, because you see sometimes on their Instagram pages or their Instagram stories how they sort of share what other artists are doing, and I find that so wonderful.
Yeah, it is. It's truly an amazing thing. I don't know exactly where it comes from. And having traveled a bit, like I recently was in the UK. I think what it is the music scene in South Africa, as vast as South Africa is tiny. It's so small. Like everybody knows everybody. So in a situation like that, I feel like it incentivizes people more to like try to help each other, because everybody who's in this tiny scene knows if I don't help this person and if I don't render some assistance there, it's going to negatively impact the whole scene in general. And all that we want as musicians is for the scene to get better. And yeah, I think that's where it comes from. But it's a very South African thing.
Yeah, and I also spoke to Kurt Darren yesterday, and he said that collaborating with other artists, going into concerts and inviting other artists along, sort of, he loves that. And is that for you also? Is that also something that you do?
Yeah, it's always something that I've enjoyed doing. Unfortunately, I find it difficult to find sort of the right musicians to work with when it comes to putting a band together and performing in a collaborative way on stage. But it's something that I really, really enjoy doing. And even when I go to other people's shows and they're performing and they're friends of mine who are also musicians, or they recognize me and they want to play a song together, that's something I enjoy quite a lot, because it's always fun. It adds an element of I would say mystery and spontaneity, where you don't really know what's going to happen on stage,
Oh yeah.
because there's another creative on the other side sort of doing it with you, which is always very, very fun. And it breathes life into performing again every once in a while.
And you do your, mostly your own songwriting.
Yes, all of the songs that I put out under my name are written completely by me.
Mm. And you
Mm.
say you also write in English.
Yeah, I do. That's sort of how I started. Before I started writing music, when I was starting to play guitar, most of the songs that I started learning were songs in English. You know, stuff like Hotel California
Oh
and
yeah.
Redemption Song and you know all of those classics. So my springboard into being a musician was very English based.
Okay.
Yeah.
And well, actually, this was actually what attracted me to your voice. Was you sang perfect that day? The cover, you did the cover, and it was so beautifully sung, and that really, drew me to your voice. So
Mm-hmm.
I remember that time when you sang the cover. So, but wonderful that you now have your own music and singing your own songs.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. And do
Yeah,
you? Now carry on.
Yeah, I was gonna say another thing that I've enjoyed about doing covers in the last few years is that the approach that I have is I try to take a song and sort of make it my own, reimagine it
Yeah.
just a tiny bit to where I give it something new whenever I perform it. So when people walk by, it's a song that's familiar, but there's an aspect to it that's unique to me. I find that makes it much easier to draw people in and to stand out whenever I perform and I'm doing covers.
Mm. Well, I spoke to a singer-songwriter a while ago also who mentioned that and said that, covers are actually a wonderful way of sort of putting your own stamp to it, but also a way of, um, it's practicing your voice and your performance and so on with something that's familiar and people can recognize that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Mm.
exactly the point because as much as it's amazing to be an artist who has all of these things to say and you want to put all these things out into the world, when you're somebody who's doing music professionally for a living like I do, there's an aspect to it where you're going to need to be an entertainer and you're going to need to satisfy a need that the audience has, which is to
Oh,
be
yeah.
entertained.
Mm.
And yeah, covers just make that so much easier. And it's another thing where it's like you can practice in front of people and
Yeah.
even learn your voice because I get to do so many songs that are done by a multitude of artists. There's so many different parts of my voice and so many different combinations of the ranges in my voice that I get to put together and sort of hone, which is not something I think would be um, as easy as it is if I was only doing my own songs.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's true. And it's also familiar, when people hear it and it's a familiar song, it sort of breaks the ice to get to know you then as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because this is something I've heard quite a few very, very accomplished musicians say. It's that it's great that you're this artist and you believe a lot in the things that you've created, but for the person who's just walking in the street, who's just walking by you, they are not as invested in what you have to say as you are. And you need to give them a reason to stop and listen to you. And the easiest way it's going to happen for you as a musician is for you to appeal to something that's familiar to that person, which is going to be a cover.
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
It's that initial getting to know you phase almost.
Yeah.
Uh, Tell me now, what you write in English? You said you write. Is it for you easy to write in English, or is it for you just say the language that you speak? Also, the African
Uh,
language.
Bemba.
Vemba. Yeah. So is it easier for you to express yourself in Vemba, or is it the same for you as in English?
Um, I think it's actually much easier for me to write in English. So growing up, like I obviously went through the Zambian education system, and Zambia was a British colony. So English is an official
Oh,
language in
yes.
Zambia, and that's the language of instruction in all schools, whether it's government schools or private schools. So all throughout my education from grade 1 to 12, I had to learn how to speak English. And I actually have more of an education in like grammar and comprehension and composition in English than I do in Bemba, because I
Oh,
never
I
learned
see.
Bemba in school. So it's always been much easier for me to write in English. The thing I love about writing in Bemba though is because of the fact that there was no formal instruction when I was learning how to speak Bemba, and it's just a language I spoke when I would be at home with my family. When I write, the way that I write and the way that I compose is more intuitive. There isn't a lot of theory behind it. There isn't a lot of grammar and comprehension and all of that behind it. It's very, very much emotion based and it's very intuitive.
Ingila mucheni chakwe, mumano yakwe, mumi wakwe. Mutangise kubantu bakwe, nangwaka chule, tabaka mumfwe. Bantu muchalo Jesu, ukwikatana limo kwa lishupa. Bantu muchalo Jesu, ukumfwana limo kwa lishupa.
Based on the music that I listened growing up and just based on the conversations that I would have with people growing up and the stories that I heard. Yeah.
Bantu muchalo Jesu, ukwikatana limo kwa lishupa.
Well, that's amazing because that comes then from the heart, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you went to the UK. Is that something you want to pursue, that you want to, or did you have performances there?
Yes. So I had some performances there. I was there from the 1st of July to the 27th, and I had about 9 shows booked.
Wow.
8 of them were in London, and one of them was in Margate, Kent. And yeah, that's something I very much want to pursue a lot more. The idea with this first tour was it was basically like an icebreaker, me try to get my foot in the door, so that if I want to go again in the future, I not only have a bit of a network of artists and promoters that I can reach out to, it's also much easier for me to approach venues to say I want to book a show there and tell them that it's something I've done before, so they know that, you know, if they give me a date, I will actually show up.
Yeah. Is it difficult from South Africa to get, to get shows there? Is it, because it's also, again, you have to build a network.
Yeah, I would say it is. I would say it is because the way the UK is, first of all, there's a massive, massive concentration of talent everywhere you go. And secondly, the more remote you go, like outside of metropolitan areas like London, people like to sort of take care of their own, which is, in my opinion, a good thing, but it just makes it so much more difficult for somebody who's coming from outside to try to break in. I was lucky enough to work with a booking agent who's a friend of mine. He lived in South Africa for a while, booked for me while he was living in South Africa. And when he moved to the UK last year, I asked him if he was open to booking me some dates there, and he did. And I don't think it would have been as easy to book all of those dates if he wasn't on the ground, sort of going to venues and speaking to people and networking and that sort of thing.
Are you a good businessman? Do you like that side of things, promoting yourself and getting your concerts organized?
I would say I'm okay at it. And it's purely out of necessity and not out of desire. I hate it. I hate
Oh, is it?
everything that has to do with
Yeah.
music that isn't making and playing the music.
Everybody says that.
Yeah.
Rarely I find. Yesterday I spoke to Kurt Darren and he said he loves it. He loves the business side, but you
Really?
rarely find it. Yeah, that artists like the business side of things.
Yeah, no, because it takes away so much from the actual act of being a musician. Because all of
Yeah,
this stuff, it takes energy, it takes commitment, exertion from you, and there's only so much you can do as a person. And the other thing that made me hate it so much, and a lot of musicians will agree with me on this one, is when you're going into being a musician, they don't tell you.
oh
They don't
yeah.
tell you that you're going to have to be the publicist and the manager and the promoter and the accountant and all of these things. They're just like, yeah, music, cool. But then when you start doing it, you have to do all of these other things, and it's a learning curve. Like I'm able to produce, for example, I'm able to produce my own content. I edit a lot of my videos. I'm record and produce a lot of my own songs, but all of this stuff took me years to learn. And if you're somebody who's just coming into it and you have to do all of this stuff, it's
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
well, yeah.
Mm. Well, I spoke to John Foster Pedley. He's the head, the dean of the business school in Johannesburg. And I specifically asked him this question: why is it so difficult for artists to, the business side? You always, when I ask, are you good in the business, they say no. And he was thinking and saying, well, it's because really, if you think business, people who are good at business, they do it every day.
Mhm.
Artists, they play their instruments every day, so they're good at that. But business is also something that you have. It's something you have to do every day or to practice. So
Mhm.
so I see his point in that, but still, you have to have an interest, I think, in business to be really good at it.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
100%. I don't think there's any chance of you being incredibly successful without having some knowledge of business. Or you might end up being incredibly successful, but if you have no interest or education in the business side of it, you're going to get taken advantage of a lot, which is something that we see a lot in the music industry, because that's a very huge problem now, and historically it has been with artists, where we're good at playing the instruments and making the songs and getting up on stage and performing. But beyond that, there's really not much else we know. And because of that, we have a situation where the music industry, especially when you look at record labels and stuff like that, it was fundamentally built on taking advantage of artists because they didn't know any better.
Yeah.
All they knew is how to play the instrument and write the song, which ended up being detrimental to them and their legacies. Yeah.
And actually, now with social media, I mean, like what you are doing, and I mean, your videos are beautiful, and you
Thank you.
have the opportunity to do it yourself. Actually, so you have a bit of control into how you want to do it, and although it takes time, but it's your how you see it and how you want to do it, and you don't have anybody else to tell you how to do it.
Exactly. And that's the advantage that comes from being the person who can be the manager and the publicist and all of these other things, is you're not going to be relying on the pre-built system of music business where the record label basically dictates to you what you do. You're going to have a lot more control over the content that you put out, the schedule that you put out, the content in, the way that it looks, all of that. And even if you're somebody who's lucky enough as an artist to have a large amount of commercial success, you're not going to have to worry about auditing people to see if you're being paid the right amount of money, or
Oh
even
yeah.
sharing any percentage of the royalties that come from whatever it is that you create that makes a lot of money. It all comes to you. But all that only happens if you actually put in the effort to learn a little bit about the business and learn how to be self-sufficient in as many ways as you can be.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's true, and I think it gives you a little bit more power.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does.
Yeah. But Stanley, tell me, what are the wishes for you for the future? What would you like to see happen in your career?
Right now I'm at the point where after having toured, that's something that I want to explore quite a bit more. Um, because that's a natural sort of next step in my career. I don't like to say this, and I think it's a very unfortunate thing. There's a very, very limited ceiling for where you can, for how much you can grow as an artist in South Africa. And the people that break through that ceiling are very, very few as well. And when you break through that ceiling where you're going, there's very few spaces. But if you expose yourself to other markets like the UK and Europe, because of how vast they are and because of how much better the infrastructure to support artists is, there's so much more growth that you can experience there. So right now, for me, I think the best thing is to sort of explore that a bit more and see where it takes me.
I see a lot of South African artists have done this, touring in the Netherlands, in Germany, and in Switzerland, and also in the UK, even
Yeah.
as far as Australia and also China, I heard. So
Hmm.
South African music is going everywhere, it
Yeah,
seems.
exactly. South
Yeah.
Africa is having quite the year, man.
Oh, really? Oh,
Oh
that's
my
great.
God, they're just like killing it on all fronts. They're killing it in rugby, they're killing it in music, they're killing it
Exactly,
in
exactly.
MMA.
Yeah. Well, have you not had a rugby song yet? Because it seems that everybody who writes a rugby song, their song gets played at the stadium.
Maybe I should do that.
I think you should do that. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's something to explore.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, but it is true because I've been talking to a few pupils from a school in Vanderbijl Park in South Africa.
Mhm.
And we talked, I wanted to find out, what children's perception is of the arts and so on. And it seems to be still in the schools that sport gets a lot of attention but the children who do, or the pupils who do take art or drama or any art form, they seem to start realizing the advantages for them, even in other careers. So
Mhm.
let's hope the young generation, change the rules a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like there is quite a bit of a shift that's been happening in the last few years, not only in this new generation that's coming up, but with even older people from previous generations. I find that when I have the conversation of being a musician and being a creative full time, when I talk about that with people who are older, these days there's a lot less judgment and there's a lot more
Mhm.
acceptance of the fact that I'm doing this for a living than there would have been 5, maybe even 10 years ago.
Mhm.
So I think as time keeps on going, that there's definitely going to be a huge change, especially considering how big the entertainment industry is growing in South Africa and just Africa in general.
Mhm.
I feel like there's just going to be more reason for people to accept it as a legitimate way of trying to make money and as a real career that someone can pursue and sort of like push it up.
Mhm.
Because yeah, even for me growing up, like being somebody who would draw sometimes when I was a kid or when I was learning to play guitar, it wasn't something that was very encouraged by my parents or my family because the thinking is this is not something that can, you know, materialize into any sort of like real career.
It's true, and I think it's because it's so part of African tradition also. Because I think I spoke to a dancer the other day, and
Mhm.
we were talking about the fact that in African culture, singing, dancing, that's part of everyday life,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
yeah, it's maybe that's why they think it's not a job; it's just part of life, doing an art form.
Exactly. I also feel like there's a part of it that comes from how Africa sort of industrialized
Mhm.
and the opportunities that were available for Africans for a very long time as Africa was industrializing and was being developed by places like Britain and so on and so forth. For the last 100 years, as a young man, the only sort of viable ways, or as a young person really, the only sort of viable ways that you could have a career is getting an education and either migrating to a metropolitan area and getting a job in like a factory or an
Oh
office,
yeah.
or staying back home and working on a farm. It wasn't really the case that you could just like start playing guitar and then, have success. And beyond that, the examples that exist, like I'll say for Zambia, the examples that exist of people who had a lot of success in being creatives and being musicians and so on and so forth isn't a great one, because a lot of them end up dying bankrupt, dying alone, dying of AIDS. That's just sort of the perception that people have of it. It's changing a lot now, but that's been the examples that have existed in the past. So seeing that, I can understand why a lot of African families will be like, no, go and do something that'll get you
Oh
an actual
yeah.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, also, if you think of very poor communities or townships where people started singing, or children started singing in choirs, those choirs really uplift their sort of life quality, or because they were then off the streets, they had a purpose, they had something, and it's all to do with art, So for me, it's always so encouraging when I see people go into areas where there might be conflict or there might be poverty, and then use art to sort of uplift these people and the children.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really amazing. I've always wondered what the connection between those two things are, like turmoil and then art being created to get people out of it. But it's like you've mentioned, it creates a sense of community and it gives people something to do, which is I guess an amazing thing. But yeah, I never really thought of it that way.
Mm. But Stanley, this was so great to talk to you.
Mm.
Will still be following you, and it's wonderful to see how your career has developed. And I really wish for you all the best for the future, and that your dreams come true, that you can do more concerts in the UK, that you can also come to maybe to Vienna or Europe somewhere.
Mm. Yeah, thank you so much, Petra. I appreciate you taking the time and giving me the opportunity on your platform. And yeah, I most definitely will be coming at some point to Europe. And when I am, I most definitely will let you know.
Oh, please, please, definitely. I would love to see you in concert, and I would love to have a coffee with you.
Okay, awesome.
Ingila mucheni chakwe, mumano yakwe, muumi wakwe. Mutangishe kubantu bakwe, nangwaka chule, tabaka mumfwe. Bantu muchalo Jesu, ukwikatana limo kwa lishupa. Bantu muchalo Jesu, ukumfwana limo kwa lishupa. Tende como tende wakwe, ateme ya fulwe, iwoli wakwe. Tabilisha ubuntu wakwe, akule ya mone, na menso yakwe. Bantu muchalo Jesu, ukwikatana limo kwa lishupa. Bantu muchalo Jesu, ukumfana limo kwa lishupa. Bantu muchalo Jesu, ukwikatana limo kwa lishupa. Bantu muchalo